We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Prize Picks. What's up, everybody? Divisional round. It's the big show. It's a Saturday big show as well. Last week, I kind of regretted, honestly, not doing a Saturday and a Sunday show. Typically, we do that on the playoff weeks because these are some of the best weeks of the entire year for late swap, a little bit more strategy versus just kind of our normal lineup building and player pick process. But hope everyone is doing well. We're going to go position by position per usual for the DraftKings slate, the 4-game slate, and then we'll build some lineups at the end. Going to talk through like a few of the like key situations, I think, because as we kind of go through this, I do think that in general, one of the things that we really want to focus on is where we're at in the context of the slate, but also in the context of what game number we are at. So you'll hear me kind of a lot this week or this morning talking about game number 1, game number 2, because realistically, you should be late swapping your lineups as these games are unfolding based on ownership, based on production, all of that good stuff to give us a chance to get to the top of the leaderboard versus just get to the chance of, I guess, min cashing or just kind of letting it ride like the rest of people. I think by the time we get to game 3, game 4, there's not going to be a lot of late swap happening, which can give us a nice little edge. So we'll go game by game, position by position per usual. But just to kind of set the scene here, this is the kind of slate that I really like because we have a really high total game number 4. So we kind of work backwards a little bit from there. We do have in game number 1 today, Buffalo at Denver. And then we have San Francisco, Seattle tonight, Houston, New England in game number 3, which is the lowest total by a pretty decent margin. And then we end things with the highest total, LA at Chicago. So this is kind of like the perfect format that I typically like to see because we can take some shots today on Saturday to hopefully set ourselves up for some of the, I guess, explosions that we could see in game number 4, and then maybe find some low owned plays along the way. So I'm excited about this slate. Hopefully you guys are feeling great. And tomorrow, going to be doing a late swap version of this. So going to kind of build, like my plan at least is to build 10 lineups and then basically blow everything up as the slate is kind of continuing. But by the time we get back to look at some of those lineups tomorrow, we'll have a pretty good idea of situations where it's like, hey, we are really behind because we didn't have this player. We need to blow up this whole roster and try and gain some leverage. So I think it'd be fun to kind of do that with you guys tomorrow morning, same time as well. Sound good? Cool. Let's start this. I think like we always do, but I think actually let's flip this on its head because I think we're probably going to go through and get to lineups a little bit quicker today. But I think we start with this one, favorite game stack. I want to get an idea of like what game you guys like the best. So I didn't put this in order. I should have. It's basically an order of game total, Vegas total. So we got LA at Chicago, 48.5. That line has moved a little bit with the weather. Buffalo at Denver, 45.5. San Francisco at Seattle, 45. And then Houston at New England, 45 or 40.5. So this is one of the, I think, key parts of this. If you do want to just stack up one game, it can be a pretty decent strategy on these 4-game slates, but you still kind of need to figure out which one of these has the most upside to kind of blow the other games out of the water. So curious what you guys think on that. Exclamation point vote, space the number in order to place your vote. Like I said, going to try and move a little bit quicker through some of the games today than we typically, or some of the polls than we typically do. What are we liking here? How we doing, chat? Wayne Casey, what's up, my man? How we doing? Great to wake up early on a Saturday. Hey, appreciate being here, man. I know it's a little bit different than our normal schedule. Joe's in here. What's up, Joe Milk? How's it going, man? Andy, what's up, Andy? How's it going, man? Catcher, what's up, bro? The Duke's in here. How we doing? How we doing, friends? Jeff's in here. What's up, Jeff? How's it going, man? Appreciate you voting in the polls. Looks like the LA Chicago game is the one that you guys prefer. Yeah, I'm with you guys. There's a lot of I guess what you really want to focus on is teams that can generate explosive plays. Realistically, this time of the year, a lot of good defenses left, a lot of good, I think, opportunities to, I mean, realistically, a lot of good opportunities to attack from like a leverage perspective, but not a lot of good opportunities to attack from a matchup perspective, if that makes sense. Jeff's a first timer in here. Awesome, man. Yeah, we do this every single Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. But in the playoffs, I'm trying to mix in a few more of these Saturday streams as well. Get you guys in a good spot. Cool. All right, let's close this one out. Another vote for San Francisco and Seattle. I like that game a lot as well. But let's start with quarterback. Top quarterback play today. Sub only vote. Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Bo Nix, Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, Matthew Stafford, CJ Stroud, and Drake May. Obviously, from a pricing perspective, at the top, Josh Allen, 7,100. His wide receiving options are absolutely decimated at this point of the season. But at this point, we're just kind of projecting like a full Superman for Josh Allen in this spot. So I think a lot of people probably don't even realize, but 8 or more rush attempts in 8 of his last 9 playoff games. So I like all the rushing props. We talked about this a little bit on the short form video that probably came across your airwaves in some platform or some form or another. Rushing yards, 25 or more rushing yards in 9 of his last 11 playoff games. That includes 46 on the ground last year when these two teams met in the wild card round. So the Josh Allen stuff, a little bit more tricky to figure out through the air, but the rushing stuff looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. We did have an oblique injury pop up for Sam Darnold. A little bit concerning there, but the thing with Sam Darnold that we really want to focus on always is pressure, right? Is he going to have time? And it just so happens that San Francisco is one of the worst teams in the league at generating pressure. So as long as he's healthy, I do think it's a really nice spot for Sam Darnold. We'll talk a little bit more about those Sam Darnold to JSN skinnies as well. Stafford in game number 4 as well, multiple touchdowns in 12 straight games. So we had that earlier in the week that we took. Chicago also has allowed the 4th most passing touchdowns. They are not giving up a ton of touchdowns to running backs, only 9 rushing touchdowns to running backs all season. They do have the highest Vegas team total in the divisional round. So like that quite a bit. Love Puka, love Devontae. Again, we will get there. A lot of explosive plays, potential at least, in the LA and Chicago game in game number 4. Sounds like you guys like Sam Darnold quite a bit. I'm into that. I'm into that. Bo Nix is somewhat interesting just because of what he can give you on the ground. Buffalo's defense in general has been very strong against the pass. So obviously it's a great spot for RJ Harvey, which we'll talk about. But Bo Nix projecting really well based on his price at 5,800. So I think he's at least interesting. At least interesting. It's tougher a little bit for me just to get into a player like that in game number 1, because if you do burn that quarterback slot, you limit what you can do in late swap the rest of the way, essentially. Purdy's an interesting one because I think we're going to get volume. I'm just not certain we're going to get as much efficiency. Obviously, this Seattle defense has been very good this year, but also just losing George Kittle, I think, I don't think you can understate the impact that has on a guy like Purdy, but also this entire offense. So I'm not as interested in Brock Purdy, but at 5,600, I think he's somewhat interesting. CJ Stroud, no Nico Collins. We also get Drake May in this really tough matchup against Houston. Those would probably be like my bottom 3 options. If I was kind of like ranking these, I think I probably, just based on raw points alone, it has to be Josh Allen. But I think Bo Nix is somewhat interesting if you are willing to burn that quarterback slot just based on price. But I do really like the quarterbacks in game number 4 if we're just going to be stacking up those games. I might mix in a little bit of kind of the Sam Darnold skinnies, but outside of that, I'm trying to at least keep the quarterback pool pretty narrow. Running back, like I said, we're going to move through the positions a little bit quicker than normal, so we have some more time to build some lineups, build some scenarios, all that good stuff. Best running back play today, that's not Christian McCaffrey. We got RJ Harvey, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, James Cook, Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson. What do you guys like at running back on this slate? What do we like at running back? James Cook's kind of an interesting one because they did lean on him pretty heavily in this exact matchup last year. So he was able to kind of really just handle the load. 23 carries. They won that game 31-7 also, but 120 yards for James Cook in this matchup in the playoffs on wildcard weekend last week. So wouldn't be surprised if they try and get him going again. RJ Harvey, obviously really good matchup. I have the touchdown props for him pretty much everywhere. Also, no one has given up more rushing touchdowns to the position than Buffalo this year. So really like Harvey, obviously going after him at that price point, 6,200 is really strong. I think he's interesting for sure. Very interesting. While we're on the subject of touchdowns, touchdownpicks.com. If you guys want access to my touchdown model early every single week, just put your email in there. There should be a link in the description for it as well. It's 100% free. Just get an idea of what I think are the best touchdown picks for this week, but also some nice long shots as well. RJ Harvey is on the list. Spoiler alert. Christian McCaffrey not on this list. Obviously, it comes down to like those three really expensive options at the top. We have Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. We'll get to that in a second. But running back is kind of tricky on this slate. We got Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. I think Charbonnet is probably a better bet to get in the end zone per usual, but Walker has been getting the majority of the rush attempts. So I think Zach Charbonnet is one of those ones that I think people will be interested in. I guess you could talk yourself into playing both of them in certain builds. We'll talk about that in some of the scenarios that we're looking at as well. A lot of RJ Harvey love. I think I'm with you guys. I'm with you guys on that. Do we talk ourselves into any Kyle Juszczyk? I think it's more of like a fun prop bet more than anything. Probably not enough value or enough touches for DFS, but 30 plus receiving yards in 3 straight playoff games. Also, he's lined up as a tight end or in the slot for 75% of his snaps with Kittle off the field. So the Juszczyk stuff is kind of fun. The problem is the slate is pretty loose. There's plenty of value to go around, especially on the Houston side. So there's a few pieces that you'll be able to just basically get in, at least 2 of the expensive guys if you're willing to go there. Ramondre is interesting, obviously, what he's been able to do as a receiver over the last 6 games or so. But even if we expect, obviously, Drake May to be under a lot more pressure, I think that the dump offs could continue for Ramondre. But also, he's been getting some shots downfield, which is pretty crazy. The Houston defense definitely elite, but they've definitely been susceptible to these pass catching running backs lately as well. So we'll have to keep Ramondre in mind. Also, we're talking about big plays, low ownership. Travion Henderson, I think, is at least in play at running back as well. Not as interested in the Rams running backs unless you're trying to play like a Puka fade or something like that. Not a great spot for them overall. The efficiency, I'm not sure is going to be there. I'm more or less worried about touchdowns as well for a guy like Kyren Williams. I expect the touchdowns to come through the air per usual in LA, but you're going to have to pay for it, right? Harvey going to be the chalk. Don't trust Sean Payton. Yeah, he scored, I think, what did I say? In 5 of his last 6 games? 6 touchdowns over his last 6 games. Yeah. I mean, so I think you're feeling pretty good about a touchdown for RJ Harvey. The role is great. The matchup is great. I'm with you. Sean Payton's a little bit scary. Yes, Nico is out. Yeah. Not great. Not great. We do have an under out there for CJ Stroud as well. All right, let's keep this thing moving. I guess I alluded to it before, so let's go to that. Top elite play. We got Puka, JSN, and CMC. If you had to pick one between these high-priced options, who is it? Who is it? One of the expensive options, Puka Nacua, JSN, CMC. 9K Puka Nacua, 8,800 for CMC, 8,500 for Jackson Smith and Jigba. McCaffrey's going to be the chalk again at running back, obviously. Another massive game last week, 21 touches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Hasn't done a lot as a rusher, and obviously losing Kittle, that hurts in the run game as well. So the efficiency there has been kind of underwhelming. But when that happens, we kind of just get more as a receiver for CMC. I should pull this up, actually. There's a pretty crazy stat. I was kind of just looking at some of the splits, McCaffrey without George Kittle, and the numbers are actually pretty crazy in the playoffs. But also just like in general, in these games where he's out, like obviously the rushing isn't as ideal, but some of the stuff looks pretty good. So let me pull that up for you guys. See if I can show this easily. That should work. Cool. So this is like the last 7 games without George Kittle. It's last 7 just because obviously there were some games without George Kittle when he was on the Panthers. But just looking at this overall, we do see the rushing is just okay, but the receiving is pretty crazy, right? So he has an 88-yard receiving game, 92-yard receiving game, 82-yard receiving game. So what we really see is just a lot more usage through the air when we have no George Kittle out there, which isn't too surprising, but we're still getting a ton of touches here. And it's almost like a little bit more valuable to like get these receptions, right? So averaging 6.4 receptions per game, averaging almost 9 targets per game, but over 60 receiving yards. So there's a lot of stuff out there in the prop markets that I like for CMC. We're not getting as much, but I mean, if we can get 120 total yards on average without George Kittle, I think a lot of people have been kind of talking about the efficiency that we're going to lose there. Not maybe enough about the upside that's still there for CMC, right? Not good to land on your head. Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, the concussion stuff's scary. I think we kind of knew pretty early on that we weren't going to get Nico back in this one. A lot of Puka love if we were to choose one guy. Yeah, it's nice to see him like starting to get there a little bit more with touchdowns. We were a little bit worried about that at points of the season. Still really like Devontae Adams in this game. Obviously, Chicago, we haven't talked about it yet, but only the Cowboys and Lions gave up more touchdowns to wide receivers than Chicago. And they've also given up the third highest yards per target to wide receivers, second highest catch rate on throws, 20 plus yards downfield. So yeah, love me some Puka Nacua. Also, really love Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford, just like leaving those slots open for game number 4, just to kind of reverse engineer some really high upside stacks, I think is a nice approach. Can't get all 3 of these studs in. Can get 2 of them in relatively easily, though. Relatively easily. If we're just looking at some of these wide receivers, we haven't talked a ton about Jackson Smith and Jigba yet, but obviously it's a really nice matchup for him, especially since there's not going to be a lot of pressure overall coming on Sam Darnold. Those are the exact type of weeks that we want to go after JSN. 124 yards on 9 catches, 84 yards on 6 catches. That's the last 2 games against San Francisco. Yeah, the target share was pretty crazy. At a 59% target share in that first game, a 30% target share in the second game. So, lot to like about JSN yet again. Lot to like. Let's talk about some of these other wide receivers, though. Top non elite wide receiver plays today. We got some guys in Houston that are very cheap that can kind of get you into some of these studs. Christian Kirk, Xavier Hutchinson. We also got Khalil Shakir, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs. We talked about Devontae Adams. Also, Juwan Jennings, a little bit sneaky with Ricky Pearsall. Clearly still banged up. No George Kittle. What do we like at wide receiver on the non-elite side of things? Might be good to play a Seattle game. Rams will be chalky. Oh, yeah, I'm with you. We'll get into that. I think this is when we start to build lineups, it's more about building like these little like combinations of players that we can still kind of build our lineup as we go, right? So we'll be trying to figure out like if we were to play something in game number 1, what are the types of rosters that we should play? What are the pieces that we would want to take shots on? If we want to play game number 2, what types of rosters, but also like what skinny stacks, also what like combinations, mini stacks, would be like something that would give us like a little bit of differentiation, a little bit of information. Game number 2 still very early in the slate, and you kind of have to see like if we totally miss on like maybe we miss on like Kincaid or something like that. Maybe Kincaid goes off for like 25 points, and we have Tonjes at tight end the rest of the way. Like we probably still need to make up points a little bit because we're a little bit behind, right? Or some of the chalk in game number 1. Maybe we just need to blow things up a little bit. So say that we have some RJ Harvey shares and he doesn't get there. He just ends up being like 30 to 40% owned, probably closer to the middle of that, obviously. He doesn't get there. We need to kind of blow up that team, get some differentiation the rest of the way to give ourselves a chance to cash or in some of the smaller field stuff, even still get to the top of the leaderboard, right? Got some Devontae love in here. Love it. Love it. A little more expensive, obviously. The cheaper side of things, there's definitely some options if you want to get into that Houston game. Lowest total by far, though. Pretty tight spreads overall outside of Seattle and San Francisco, where Seattle is still a 7-point favorite. Interesting. Christian Kirk got there last week for us, obviously. 8 of 9 targets, 144 yards, and a touchdown. I think a lot of people are going to go back to that. Obviously, again, no Nico Collins in that spot. Xavier Hutchinson is somewhat interesting as well. We haven't gotten a lot for Jalen Knoll recently. I think we're going to see more Jaden Higgins in this game as well with Collins out. So A lot of value, but also some uncertainty there with those guys. Cooper Cup's kind of interesting, and I think I've said that all year. We haven't seen a lot for Rashid Shaheed. I think he's kind of interesting if you want to grab a guy that can just break some big plays. But from a matchup perspective, it does actually kind of favor a guy like Cooper Cup. So if we're just looking at this in general, like everyone knows that San Francisco gets crushed by slot receivers. So we did take an over on Cooper Cup receptions for that reason as well. Yeah. These Patriots wide receivers are tricky, right? Because typically we wouldn't want to play any wide receivers against Houston, especially on the outside. So we liked Kayshon Boutte a little bit last week. Don't like him near as much this week. Stephon Diggs, I think, is a reasonable volume play. So he's going to play a little bit more in the slot. But the Texans are not giving up touchdowns to the slot. One of the stingiest teams in the entire league to give up touchdowns to the wide receiver position, but especially that. So I like Diggs from a volume perspective. The ceiling is kind of my big question mark there for Diggs, if that makes sense. Um, Drake May is one of those ones that um, on paper doesn't look like he has a fantastic ceiling, but I've seen crazier things on these slates. Sometimes it makes more sense just to have, at least if you're playing a lot of rosters, have one roster out there that kind of onslaughts the lowest total game. You get it at super low ownership. And then if you do have that game that goes off, I think one of the ones that comes to mind always is that back when the Jacksonville Jaguars defense was very elite, no one wanted to play them in a playoff slate. Ended up being like a Blake Bortles like explosion game. So we got a lot of points in that game. Not a lot of people were on it. Houston, New England is tougher to figure that out, but maybe we do find some cheaper options. Maybe we end up with a Stroud stack, something like that. Travion Diggs on the other side, something like that. Snow in Foxborough during that game. Interesting. Yeah, weather-wise, we do have a little bit of wind in Houston, New England, LA Rams, and Chicago as well. It doesn't look like it's too crazy. I'm not that worried about weather this week overall. Tight end is pretty interesting this week, though. Top tight end play. Price considered. Jake Tonjes, Colson Loveland, AJ Barner, Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid, Hunter Henry, or other. What do we like at tight end today? And then we'll get into some lineup building, some situation building. May going to hit a long one flushed out of the pocket. Yes, the rushing stuff for May is pretty solid. I considered that for the video. Yeah, good call there. Guys, if you're just trickling in early as well, I would, I guess, tell you to scroll back all the way to the very beginning. We talked a little bit more about like the actual strategy for these playoff slates. We're going to be doing another one of these shows tomorrow morning to talk through late swap. So make sure you guys come hang out with us for that. I think it's fun to play like multiple lineups for these slates just because the late swap strategy, very fun. So we'll be working through what we got right today, what we got wrong today, and how to blow everything up and still give ourselves a chance tomorrow. So 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, we'll be doing some late swap. Jake Tonjes leading the way on the poll so far for tight end. Interesting. Interesting. Quick recap as well. At the quarterback position, I still really like the idea of leaving your slots open for game number 3. That's not going to be super unique. These LA and Chicago stacks will be pretty popular. Also, really like if you're just trying to trot out Josh Allen. Obviously, I think it's a relatively flat quarterback slate. Bo Nix is kind of popping in some optimizer sims right now. I think it's mostly because of the rushing in this game, but also his price. So burning a slot in game number 1 on quarterback isn't typically what I would try and do on this slate, but it's at least interesting. I think the skinny stacks for Sam Darnold are fine. It's kind of spread out at quarterback. Running back, I think Christian McCaffrey's in a tier of his own. He's kind of in that same tier as like CMC, Puka, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Those 3 guys, you're probably going to have 2 on most of your rosters. Outside of that, really like RJ Harvey. And then I would say both the Seattle running backs are in a pretty good spot. James Cook will offer some leverage, I think. We didn't talk a whole lot about him, but had a really good game against Denver last year in the playoffs. So wouldn't be surprised by that. I think that he definitely loses a little bit of touchdown upside with all the tush push stuff for Josh Allen around the goal line, but he's interesting. Wide receiver, it's Puka and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think in that order at the top, and then a very big tier gap. And I think you're going to have to kind of find someone of these like cheaper options to get into whether it's Christian Kirk, whether it's Xavier Hutchinson, Khalil Shakir, something like that. Like I said, I think Cooper Kupp's interesting from a matchup perspective. Tight end, though. Looks like you guys like Tonjes a lot. Colston Loveland, a little bit more expensive, but he's been absolutely on fire. Dalton Schultz, AJ Barner. I think those are kind of the guys I'm looking at. If you want to take a shot on Dalton Kincaid early, I think that's okay. I just don't know if I'm going to do that personally. Stover, nice price. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, like what are you able to? I mean, you're able to get into a lot if you're willing to go down to a guy that's 2,500. Sure. You're never going to get pushback from me on just paying down a tight end. All right, seems like we're pretty aligned on tight end. Let's go back to this poll, and I'll just let this one ride as we start to build out some of these situations. But favorite game stack, if we were to stack up one of these games, what is it? What is it? And then obviously Prize Picks, play 5, get 50 is still active. Use code HulkAlive so that I know you came from the live stream. Would really appreciate it. Go get your free $50 going into the divisional round. Might as well. Might as well. So I think kind of what I'm focused on here and what I want to do with you guys today is go through, if we're going to go game by game, also like some of the situations that I like the most. I don't think building like full lineups is that useful for you guys right now. I think I'll end up with completely different lineups tomorrow anyways, as I'm kind of late swapping after game number 1 and game number 2. So I think what I want to do is go through what I think are the best situations to kind of get some early information, also some things to build around a little bit. If that sounds good to you guys. So if we're just talking about game number 1, I think some of the situations that I think are kind of interesting is, we'll start with this. If we're going to go with the Josh Allen team, I really like the idea of, just ask yourself, how does Josh Allen completely get there? And then what are some of the other expensive options that would have to fail for him to be kind of like that runaway player? So to me, we would probably have to have JSN and Puka Nacua, at least one of them fail, maybe both of them fail. So how does JSN fail, for example? So one of the situations I really like, if we are going to play Josh Allen, I really like the idea of playing both of the Seattle running backs or one of them. But if like the Seattle running backs absolutely run away with it, they score all the touchdowns, maybe JSN doesn't get there, right? So I think the Josh Allen stuff with that combination certainly makes some sense. I think in these games, you could also make an argument for playing Kyren Williams. Like I said, I don't love the Kyren stuff in general. I'm kind of just all over the passing game there, but you could kind of leave this as a flex option and just really try and hammer what happens if Puka fails, what happens if Walker and Charbonnet fail, right? So I think that'd be one of the ones I'd be looking at. If you do want to try and get Josh Allen and skinny stacks involved, I think one of the things that you could consider doing is just doing like a skinny stack with Kincaid, right? Obviously, Kincaid, I believe he was in a walking boot at the end of last week, but doesn't carry an injury designation going into this game. So it sounds like he's going to be just fine. Yeah, obviously tough matchup against Denver, but they have given up some receptions to tight ends. So I think the skinny stack, just trying to get some early information there. If you do end up running away with like a nice Kincaid game, it helps you a lot. Probably going to be around 10% ownership, so you'll get some leverage there. And basically 4,300, you'll get some leverage on Dalton Schultz people, but also you'll be getting a nice little head start on the Tonjes and Barner people out there for a little bit cheaper, right? So I think that skinny stack is somewhat interesting. Another thing in game number 1 that I would be considering for some early information is just playing some James Cook one-offs. I think that's kind of nice. Like I said, if it does end up shifting to Cook getting all the touchdowns versus Josh Allen, like we just saw Josh Allen running in 2 touchdowns on the ground, that can change quickly. And I do think that they could load him up, try and get the run game very involved here with how banged up they are at wide receiver. I do really like the James Cook one-offs. So you can get Harvey involved here. Obviously, he's still one of the best plays. It doesn't mean you can't play good plays in the early games. So I still think that the Harvey and Josh Allen stuff is totally fine. If you just wanted to run something like this out, I think that is an interesting way to attack that game as well. Game number 2, if we were to like go through and talk through what are the actual scenarios that I'd want to have access to and what I'd want to build around, one of the ones that I really like isn't going to shock anyone, but I do really just like the Sam Darnold to Jackson Smith and Jigba skinny stacks. I think you can build some really nice teams around just starting with something like this. Obviously, you can add in McCaffrey and just like stack up this game in general. Like I said, we're not going to do this probably today. There's probably a ton of ways that you can just like overstack certain games. The Seattle side of this, though, if you just wanted to get like a little bit of access to this game, I do think that skinny stack is very, very strong. If you wanted to go the other direction here, I think you want to go if you're building around CMC. The other side of it, what I would prefer to do is try and get a little bit of leverage, but also gets like a little bit of explosiveness. So I kind of like the CMC Shaheed mini stack. And then I don't think a lot of people are going to play Cooper Kupp. It is a really good matchup for him. And at 3,500 opens up a lot for the rest of your roster. So the McCaffrey Kupp mini stacks, I think, are really interesting. And I did mention this before too, but if we want to play the other side of the JSN chalk, I really don't hate the idea of just playing both of these guys together with Walker and Charbonnet. You grab all the touchdowns, you grab a lot more of the attempts, and you're kind of insulated there if they end up going super run heavy in this game. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to kind of build in just like a little bit of upside, but also just like a little bit of floor here in game number 2 is like have a roster that has this combination in it, basically. That's what we're talking about. Onslaught wise, I actually don't think that the Purdy direction is the worst idea. So if you wanted to go with like a Purdy, CMC, and like Jennings, something like that, maybe you add Tonjes as well. This is like one of those scenarios where we're going to get a ton of pass attempts for Purdy. Obviously, that makes a ton of sense. You can bring it back with JSN on the other side. I think that is probably a nice little starting point if you did want to like fully overstack this game. I think the Purdy side is kind of interesting for volume for sure. I don't know if we're going to get the efficiency, but the volume is pretty nice. Ricky Pearsall banged up, no George Kittle. If you want to get really wild, throw some Kyle Juszczyk in there. I don't know if that's going to be for me, but I think that the overstacks with Purdy are ones that I'm super interested in. Game number 3, this is the one that I'm struggling with a little bit more, like to get like super excited about. But again, I think if you are going to dive your way into this game, I don't want to have just like a few pieces of it personally. You're already in game number 3. You have a ton of information from games 1 and 2. I think that I would be a little bit more likely to just have like a complete overstack in this game. If you don't want to go with Stroud, I totally understand that. Maybe you get May with some rushing ability. So I actually don't hate the idea of playing May, but then also playing some of the really nice value that we have on the other side of this game. So maybe we get some Christian Kirk in here. We're kind of looking at maybe it's like a Jaden Higgins, but honestly, like I think Hutchinson makes a lot of sense. So like maybe you're just kind of mixing and matching some of these. Schultz. So you're basically playing that Drake May has a decent game on the ground at 6,300, and then you're playing a lot of the value on Houston. I think that's at least something that you could consider. I don't know if it's something that I would really love. You could try and get, if you wanted to go with Stroud, another way you could approach this is try and get some explosiveness on the New England side. So Travion Henderson, big play, something like that, right? I think that if you wanted to go that direction, I probably would prefer that versus the New England pass catchers. Diggs is fine. I think he's a little bit overpriced. Also, Kayshon Boutte, the upside typically there on the outside, not really in this matchup though. So I think those are the kind of like core combinations that I'll be working through this morning as I kind of build out some of my pods. Game number 4, this is the fun game, right? So there's a ton of things you can do here. Obviously, really like the Caleb stuff as well, just because I think they're going to be super aggressive through the air. They haven't been running the ball as well recently. So you can make an argument for Caleb. Also, obviously, just getting Colson Level in there makes a ton of sense. At wide receiver, typically the matchup that we want to try and attack here is on the outside against the Rams. So this is a really good Roma Dunze spot. He has not been healthy, though. That's kind of the big problem with that one. I think people just don't realize how bad LA has been at defending the perimeter. They've given up the 5th highest yards per target to outside wide receivers, and Odunze plays nearly 75% of his snaps out wide, at least last week. So I think he's interesting. You could probably put DJ Moore into that bucket as well because he does play a little bit on the outside as well. So if you wanted to get in like a heavy Caleb stack, I think this is kind of interesting. On the other side of this game, obviously Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith and Jigba, like that conversation is going to be definitely a decision people have to make. I prefer Puka in this spot. I also think that if you wanted to get in just these like double stacks with Stafford, Puka Nacua, you can't do much better than that in this spot. We talked about it before, but this was kind of an interesting stat too. So Devontae and Puka have earned 68 targets over the last 3 games that they've played together. The craziest part, though, is last week, one of them was targeted on 74% of Stafford's attempts. Completely nuts. Obviously, the matchup looks good as well. Chicago, one of the worst defenses remaining. Third highest yards per target to wide receivers allowed. Second highest catch rate on throws 20 plus yards downfield. So, like the Puka Nacua deep catch props, also from an Adams perspective and Puka as well, only the Cowboys and Lions give up more touchdowns to wide receivers than Chicago. So, really like the idea of having this be like a core piece that you have basically for that hammer in game number 4, right? And then if you want to bring some bringbacks on the other side, I think that's totally fine. We talked about how I like Loveland, and also just taking care of the tight end slot is nice. Having that Loveland hammer is interesting. You may not have like this type of salary left as you're like taking some shots through some of these other games as we progress through the slates, or through the games. But do really like the idea of just kind of waiting in the wings. If you have some CMC, it's really difficult to do this. So you might be on a CMC fade if you completely get there. It's something to consider. I would say this, though. We didn't talk a ton about defense. I typically don't play defenses in game number 1, basically ever. But if we're just looking at this Broncos defense at 2,800 at home, if you're not planning on playing a ton of Josh Allen stuff or stuff in this game, I think that you could do worse than Broncos, even in game number 1. I would consider it. My favorite defense is probably going to be in game number 2. We talked about how we're going to get volume on the San Francisco side. I think that the Seattle defense at home in an amazing spot here. Really like the defenses on both sides of this game, because I think if we get a little bit of Sam Darnold, maybe that injury ends up being a little bit worse and that oblique. I think both those defenses are totally fine to play. Texans D, obviously, we could make an argument for them at any point. At 3,400, that's a little bit steep, but I actually don't even hate the idea. Like big total, maybe we just get a lot of pass attempts on this game in general, and we get low ownership on Rams and Bears. So if you have to wait and you just want to get some low ownership, I don't think it's the worst idea. Most of my teams are probably going to have some combination of Seahawks, 49ers defenses. I just think that's kind of an interesting route to go. And then Denver defense. And then maybe if I don't have any of those, I'm probably just going to stay away from Houston and New England. I'll save a defense slot for Rams at Chicago. You don't have to pay as much attention to like negative correlation on a 4-game slate as usual. But those are some of my like favorites, like I think spots that I'm going to be attacking, at least as we start this 4-game slate. So come hang out with us tomorrow. We'll go through some late swap as well. You'll see kind of where I landed with some specific builds, but also some adjustments that we're going to have to make after these games start. So hope everyone enjoys that today. And if you're here for the first time, hit subscribe, all that good stuff. Use code HulkAlive on Prize Picks, get your free $50 before the game start today. And we'll see you guys tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time per usual. And we'll talk through all of this stuff yet again, and we'll see where we're right, where we're wrong, and how to kind of rebound from there. All right, cool. Talk soon, guys. Thanks for being here.